Kevin Carroll, you play John Murphy in The Leftovers, and which, as we're speaking, is nearing the end of its third and final season on HBO. And it's an intensely emotional experience for the characters on screen, of course. But was it emotional when you were done shooting the show?
Oh, for sure. This is in it's really been sort of a short time, but because of the depth of the work, I think you form a bond with people that's not like your average sort of. It's not like the run-of-the-mill jobs. The work in the show has required us all to go to such a uh, emotionally open and deep place that you only, one of the beautiful things about being able to get to that level of work is that there's a trust that's formed with each other and going that deeply in the work. So it feels like it's way too early to end this journey. And, in a lot of ways, I feel like, we're in a place now where we're really ready to jump as a company of actors and the writer's room. Those guys are just as solid as you can ask for. And so it was a hard pill to swallow to do, knowing that we were heading toward the end. It was hard.
You joined the show in season two when the story moved from New York to Texas. And by that time, the show had already developed a reputation for being dark and strange. And then season two even managed to top that. What did you think about the show just from a story perspective early on when you started shooting it, when you joined?
I think, it took a minute to settle into and to digest, because the work is so layered, and it was definitely a lot of religious references in the first season. Which as people who follow the series may know, Tom Perrotta wrote the book, and so the book was um, had so many religious references in it that if you haven't been to church in a while, you may be a little rusty on some of the Bible references that were made. So for me, I think spirituality is a big part of life and a big part of my life. But being directly ready for the challenges of the parallels from the Bible, it took me a minute. I had to go back and try to find and look up and reference some things to be reminded of. But once you do that and you're able to see the how the parallels in the first season work with the Bible, and you start to understand that there's a conversation happening beneath the conversation of the show, it started to be like really exciting and incredible. But it did take a little while to catch up with, as going into season two, there was such a short time between getting cast and starting the job that I had to go back and start watching and doing a lot of research as we were doing in the midst of shooting season two. So it was like working during the day on where we were in season two, and then going back and catching up with everything from season one at nights, and trying to learn lines and be ready for the next day. So it was a lot to hurry up and catch up with, but it was so rewarding to have done.
And I've, from speaking to, cast members in the past, I've heard that the writers and the producers of the show are fairly tight-lipped about future story development. So people are kind of not necessarily flying blind, but there's a lot that the cast members don't know. Has that been the case for you as you worked on the show?
Yeah, for sure. I wouldn't. It's like you said. I wouldn't say flying blind completely, but I would say flying mostly blind. Maybe with with one eye open into the wind. Definitely, Damon brought in the beginning, I mean, Damon sort of suggested the notion of where he wanted this character, where he wanted the season to start, and didn't go much beyond that. But there were definitely, with Damon, what I learned in the process of it was that he will give you enough to work with in the moment. And if you get stuck and he thinks you're legitimately stuck, then he can feed you as much as you want to. But I think Damon finds it exciting to watch the messiness of actors wrestling with the characters. So in some way, I think that feeds something. Maybe, Damon doesn't need any help creatively, but I do think that Damon doesn't panic if something doesn't go the way he thought it went, if it illuminates something about the human condition. So this notion of not giving actors enough to show up with completely prepared performances, what it allows one to do as an actor is show up with enough to start with, and then you are able to allow what someone else is bringing to the table in a very considerate way, because you don't really know or have a chance to try to angle anything with character, or you're not planning ahead in what you're doing. You have to be able to absorb the moment, live in the moment, and see what happens from that. And in an odd way, I think that's exciting for Damon to watch, because I think Damon has a deep level of understanding about the characters in general, and I also think that he's able to construct some things and add some things and take away some things if he needs to facilitate journey. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Your character has undergone a particularly significant change from the moment we met him to where he is in season 3. At first he was very angry and he rejected the mysticism that was supposedly surrounding his town where no one departed. But season 3, he seems to be much more of a believer. Was it challenging to play that shift? Since this season takes place a considerable amount of time after season 2.
For sure. I don't know that angry is a word that I would assign to John, even in the second season, but I do think, you have someone who is fiercely protective, right? If you look at John, we examine a person who has come from a specific type of abuse in his life, and that would be an inciting incident for John that has determined a line of behavior for John, which when I looked at it, I would consider, rather than it being a blanket sense of anger, I would say, there was a moral sense of correctness, and the way that he was going to, the way that he saw life happening as he moved forward had to be with this idea of fairness and not taken advantage of. So there was a refusal to be taken advantage of by John that I think, gets a lot of time, it gets translated into him being angry and this and that. But I think it was a deep sense of protectiveness about some of the damage and some of the things that he had been through. I hate to call it damage in that way, but I guess after being taken advantage of on such a deep level, I can only imagine that John said, this will never happen to me or anybody around me again. And that is sort of the course that he set off on for his life, right? And then, moving into season 3 is really tricky, because at the end of season 2, to the actual filming of the end of season 2, to the filming of the beginning of season 3 was it was a good amount of time, but it was not 3 years. So to come back in about 6 months, I guess it was 6, 7, 8 months, whatever it was, but to come back to this as a person when the character has moved ahead 3 years, the emotional journey for me hadn't been tied up. I still had loose ends. Like I still miss as Kevin, the person, as the family, and what the show required us to do. Javon and Regina, you know, I really, I still miss them, you know. Even I didn't have a chance to resolve, as it should be, I guess, the, you know, relationship with my daughter, Jasmine, who plays Evie so beautifully. The show moved it, what the 3 years that we see John, he has moved so drastically emotionally that I didn't get a chance to, in the 3 years that we see John and his transformation, it also requires that the actor has made a transformation of some sort of resolve in the short time between the end of season 2 and the beginning of season 3 in filming for yourself, right? So you as an actor, you carry the journey within you, and so you have to end the journeys and begin the journeys within yourself. That's the actor's job. The responsibility to the role, the responsibility to the character, the responsibility to the writing, that's your job as an actor. So I had no idea until we started filming that the 3-year jump was going to happen. So I hadn't taken the time, or there wasn't the time to sort of resolve anything within myself before I started. Now, the great thing for me was that I started with Amy Brenneman, and I've known Amy for 15 and 20 years. So we found a comfort in this sort of uncomfortable transitional space. But we found a great comfort in each other, and it wasn't, we didn't have to go through any sort of initial sort of dance, trusting dance. It just was what it was. And we could enter into this space of relationship in a very easy, trusting, and playful way. So that was great. That was the greatest part about it. But it was very tricky moving from the end of season 2 emotionally for Kevin. As it filtered into John, it was very tricky to move from the end of season 2 into the beginning of season 3.
Yeah, and you know, it's interesting, the relationship between John and Laurie that picks up in season 3. You know, by the time we pick back up with these characters again this season, they've been in a relationship for quite some time now.
Yeah.
But a lot of that, you know, we haven't seen up to that point.
Right.
So, you know, you mentioned having that. You know, having known Amy Brenneman for a while. You know, how did you work with her to try and make that relationship, you know, feel lived in and sort of to carry that history that, you know, we don't necessarily get to see?
Right. Well, that's exactly what I was saying. Like, for us, because we have been friends for so long, we were able to just talk about actually very little. We didn't have to talk about a lot because it was a while ago, but we had quite a long time that we spent doing a play together in New York. And so the basis of our friendship was there from 20 years ago. And so over the years, we've talked and, I've watched her on all of the incredible shows that she's done since then. And so our history, in terms of going into the relationship, had a bit of a foundation. So we were able to move in and move through and just try to get to the heart of the work without it seeming more awkward than it needed to be. Amy's very, she's very giving as an actress. I was very lucky on this show. I mean, Regina King was incredible to work with, incredibly giving. And I thought, and then hoped that relationship, that we would see that relationship last for a while. But if the relationship was going to not work, and if John was going to be remarried and try to work it out with anybody else, then Laurie was like the perfect sort of transitional partner to try to make it all work out with. Because on a personal level, just who they are as women and actresses, strong, open, and generous as players. It just made it great. I couldn't have asked for a better dance partner in either of them.
Season 2 of the show, one of the big changes this year is that it took place in Texas last season, and this season a lot of the action moves to Australia, and the show actually filmed in Melbourne. Did that change of locale have a significant impact on how the production felt on set and the process?
Well, I will say that Australia, there's a reality to them having 4 seasons in one day. That is really real. And as some of these episodes come up, I'm thinking it was so brutally cold when we shot these scenes, but it's nothing like it started out. In other words, you wake up in the morning, the sun was out, and you're thinking, oh, it looks warm out. By the time you get out, it's a little breezy. Then by noon, maybe there's a quick rain shower, rainstorm, and then it dries up, and then mild weather's out, and then by the time the sun went down, it would be absolutely freezing. So I'm looking at the show now and just thinking it was brutally cold on some of these days, and then other days when the sun is out, very nice, kangaroos hopping, marsupials all around. Like everybody's out, it's great. And yet an hour or two later, now we're drenched. So it's really funny to go back and see the show put together and think about the specific moments in time. But also, there's a spiritual aspect to Australia as well. And we were fortunate in that we shot in and around really sacred places and around tribal energy that still to this day is some of the oldest history that you can find in terms of tradition. And so there's something about just knowing that information and working in that space that made the experience transcendent in a way that is really hard for words. I think we had everybody from crew to actors to producers that were engaged and felt like this sacred sense of spirituality that got infused in the work in a way that is very hard to top. Not that there aren't some sacred places in America that we still hold or we see as sacred. And definitely in Texas, there's this notion of our history. The land in Texas holds a specific history. But when you go to some of these places where they still have tribal rituals and people who are still practicing these rituals that have not changed from such a long history, you have to honor that in a way. And I think Damon's sense of moving the show may have, I think that's a part of what he wanted to have included in the work. And it just, it's really something that was hard to put into words. But when you know you're walking on such sacred ground and these rituals are still alive and people still practice them and live by them, you couldn't help but be moved or infused with a bigger sense of responsibility and honor about where you were as you were doing this show. Really really memorable. I won't forget this one.
Now the show is coming to a close soon. Without giving anything away about plot details or certainly anything like that, how did you feel when all was said and done about where the story ended and where you leave things with John?
Well, that's a hard question because I couldn't separate myself from John in terms of feeling that the show could live a few more seasons before it came to an end. I think, just as there, I think we've seen an attempt by John to accept where he is and how life is going at this moment. But I don't think he's lost his drive to continue down this road if and when the opportunity were presented to really have his daughter back. I don't think he's finished that journey. Given that, I wasn't ready for the show to end, and it's difficult to it's really difficult to come to terms with. But, that's the thing about all great shows and all shows that are not so great is that they all come to an end at some point. So as an actor, you learn to live with that notion. But this was really a really great experience, and I'm still not ready to acknowledge that it's not going to be around.
Well, it's going to be hard for us watchers of the show to experience that when the show does finally air its finale as well. All good things must come to an end, alas.
Yeah, there it is. There it is.
Yeah, well, I want to congratulate you again on the show, and best of luck on these next 2 episodes as they air, and in all future endeavors. I mean, looking forward to certainly more of that and more of your work.
Hey, man, I appreciate you, and hopefully we'll get a chance to do it again. And I hope you enjoyed the last couple of episodes of the show, man.